Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot this week about the subject of asking for vacation at work,
Wow.
specifically requesting more vacation time. And I used to have this idea that you were basically asking for the equivalent of a 2% increase in pay. And then I realized that wasn't right. And the reason I used to think that was that there are 52 weeks in a year. And if you get one more week of vacation, the company is paying you for 1/52nd of the year, but you're not working.
Yeah.
So that's equivalent to about 2% of your pay. So I've been thinking about this a lot lately and kind of had a realization. So let's think about this. Let's say that you add up the total value of your employment. So the total cost of employing you to your employer. So that would be your salary, your employer portion of your medical benefits, your dental and your vision benefits, your 401k matching, your HSA, everything you get from your employer.
I think instead of calling that value, you'd probably want to call that like your total compensation. Right.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So add up the dollar value of those things,
hmm
and then you would adjust that for how many hours a year you work.
2,000.
Yeah, to make it easy. And you would come up with what it costs your employer to employ you for 1 hour. And
Okay.
let's just be wildly optimistic and let's say it was $100. Okay. So, I've done this calculation for myself and it's not $100, but
Okay.
let's just say it was $100 because we just want to do some simple math here.
Yeah. Podcast math.
We'll keep it nice round numbers. So $100. And let's say that you're on some nice profitable program and you bill your time to a customer. So like some engineers and like a lot of lawyers and accountants and professionals like that, you have a customer that your company bills your time to and they pay your company at some rate. Okay.
Okay.
So let's say that rate is $300 an hour,
Okay.
which is not unreasonable for those kind of professional jobs. And when you ask for another week of vacation, it's not just that your company is having to pay you $100 an hour for 40 hours that you are no longer working for that week, but you are no longer billing at $300 an hour for that week.
Mm.
So you fail to bring in $300 every hour. So every hour you fail to bring in $300 and you cost $100. So the net difference to your company is $400 an hour. Times 40 hours is $16,000 for the week.
hmm
And so it has a much larger effect on your company. They lose much more than you gain. So it's not a zero-sum game like I had always thought it was. And the more interesting thing that I realized was, now imagine that you're someone at the same company, and let's say you have the same salary somehow, but you work in HR or you work in some other department that bills directly to the company. You don't bill to an outside customer.
Okay.
And so the money that goes to pay your salary comes directly from other profits of the company. And so when you ask for another week of vacation to be added to your benefits, the company is not looking into that calculation as, well, that's 40 hours of billing lost. All they look at for that person is it's just 40 hours that will pay that person and they're not working. So it's cheaper for the company to give that person more vacation than it is to give the person that bills to an outside customer at a high billing rate. And so there are all these other considerations I had never thought of when I naively thought of it as, it's just valued at 2% of your pay because it's 1/52nd of the year. And I thought, it's really easy. It ought to be really easy for a company to just fork over another week of vacation. And I thought about it for a while. And then I was like, oh, well, gee, if you actually produce a lot of value for the company by billing a customer with deep pockets at a really high rate, it actually disincentivizes the company from wanting to give you more vacation.
Yeah. That's kind of a painful calculus.
Yeah.
It seems like a solution would be, I don't know how popular this would be, but to build something like engineer effective hours. And then you're like, we're going to have this guy working on it with all of his full-time ability, but he may take vacation during that time, and then bill it like that way.
So bill the customer at a lower rate.
Yeah. Like,
with the understanding that some of those hours nothing may get done.
Yeah, but he'll be thinking about it while he's in Hawaii for sure.
I promise you I will not be thinking about it in Hawaii. I go home on the weekend and I don't think about it. I go home in the evening and I don't think about it.
Yeah, I get to work on Mondays after a weekend, and sometimes I sit down at my computer and I'm like, what was this guy working on before I got here? What's going on? And it's like, I have no memory of this place.
Last Thursdayism.
Yeah, pretty much. So are you still asking for more vacation?
Not anymore.
You broke your own spirit.
Yes. I also have an interview tomorrow afternoon, so.
We won't tell everyone who listens to the podcast or anything.
Probably a good idea. It's amazing how fast they're moving, though. Like, literally Thursday night, I submitted my resume to them. And by the next Wednesday, I had talked to the hiring manager, had an interview scheduled, and had all the security paperwork to get into their facility done.
It's pretty good.
In 6 days. Yeah. They're super serious.
All right. So today we were going to talk about cryonics.
Isn't that just where you like put a hot dog in liquid nitrogen and then break it with a hammer?
Almost. That's cryogenics. Cryonics would be more like if you put a lab rat into liquid nitrogen and then break it with a hammer.
I don't see a worthwhile distinction. In physics lab in college, we put all kinds of stuff in the liquid nitrogen. We mostly just dropped it on the floor then.
That sounds pretty fun. I wish I had a whole bunch of liquid nitrogen.
Were we doing cryonics or cryogenics? Or were we just fucking around with liquid nitrogen because we could?
Yes. I believe cryonics is just a different term to distinguish that we're trying to freeze formerly living beings and do something with them later. Cryogenics is just the study of very cold things. And so I think when you're just freezing stuff in liquid nitrogen and smashing it, you're not really doing anything. It doesn't really have a name. It's like cryofuckery. I don't know. But yeah, cryonics is the, what would you call it?
Blake, what is the goal of cryonics?
Well, cryonics is like I'm trying to think of the term for it. It's not like the science of doing it. I guess it's the process of taking somebody who has been declared legally dead and lowering their body down to liquid nitrogen temperatures with the hopes of doing something with that body at a future time. And I think that generally this is held to be a very weird belief that people freeze themselves after they die and think they'll be resurrected for whatever reason, and it'll never work. And I think there is a huge amount of skepticism around it. I mean, well-founded skepticism, because no one's ever been thawed, and it's probably not going to happen for a very long time. And I believe the depiction in popular culture is often that it's a completely stupid thing to do, like a waste of money and a scam or whatever. Or alternatively, the depiction is people go into cryo sleep, and you've probably seen a fair amount of that. I believe all the Aliens movies talk about it. That's how they take their spaceships around, because I think their journeys take enough years that it would be really boring. So they just go into cryo sleep because they're bored. And it happens in Futurama. I've actually had people ask me, if you go into cryonics, are you in like a glass chamber where people can see your frozen face? And no, that's not how it works.
So the goal is to take your body near death, near the time of death, and
after legal death.
After legal death, but
yeah,
before something called information theoretical death that we'll get to.
Yeah.
And freeze it in the hopes that in the future they can reanimate you and fix whatever it was that caused your legal death.
Yeah. Or I suppose more amusingly, you could reanimate people and then they would still just die of cancer anyway. And you'd be like, haha, I gotcha. I don't know why you would do that. But yeah, that's the general idea. Do you want to explain what information theoretic death is then?
No, I'll let you.
Okay. So information theoretic death is the idea that your body contains all this information, most importantly your brain. It contains this information about who you are. And if that information is, if it has enough entropy added to it, like it's burned to ashes, then there's no way to ever recover it. No amount of technology could ever get it back. But if only a very limited amount of damage happens to it, and most of the information is still in its original configuration, then perhaps it could be retrieved. An analogous example that actually works is people will have a hard drive crash and they're data recovery firms and they can get the information back off your hard drive. And it's because the hard drive hasn't experienced information theoretic death. It hasn't like been shredded or burned or something like that. It's just harder to read the data out of it. And so arguably for someone who's just died like 1 second ago, but whatever your definition of death is, all the information that made them who they were is still encoded in their brain, and it hasn't been destroyed yet. It's just inaccessible because their body doesn't work. So the idea of cryonics is to try and intercept people, like just after the point of legal death, but before the point where all the information that made them who they are has been destroyed, and then freeze them so that nothing can happen to that information, and it just is held in stasis for an indefinite period of time.
And then eventually, when the technology is good enough, thaw them out, do any repairs to the brain that are necessary, and then repair the rest of the body in some way in order to make it livable again, and then have the person alive again.
Yeah, that's one of the ways. The person's brain could have other things happen to it too. Mm-hmm. But the simplest scenario to think about is you're thawed and walking around again and healthy. That's definitely the simplest thing to think of.
So are people being frozen like that now?
Yeah, I believe it was Robert Edinger who was the guy who came up with the idea of freezing people after they died. And he was frozen in the late 60s, early 70s. I'm not sure when. And he was probably frozen with the worst process, I think, that anyone's used, because they've only improved it since then. And so it could be that it would be very hard to ever resurrect him. But he was frozen. Other people have been frozen since then. I believe it's up to several thousand people now, but not 10,000 across the whole world in all the facilities. So there's many more people who are alive now who are signed up to be frozen when they die, but not that many people have actually been frozen because it hasn't been around that long. Not very many people know about it. Once people find out about it, there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical that it'll work and not sign up for it. So it's a very limited set of people.
So are there a bunch of companies providing this service?
There's a few. So there's Alcor in Arizona, and there's Cryonics Institute in Michigan. There's at least one company in Russia, and I believe there's one company in the UK. And I think there's several more in the US, though I don't know which ones they are. And I believe, at least in the US, these companies are all non-profits. So if someone has this argument that they're trying to profit off of some sort of false afterlife belief, like, they're a non-profit. So they're not really. They genuinely believe in what they're doing, even if you don't necessarily believe in it.
So do you just call them up and say, hey, I want to sign up, and when I die, I want to be frozen?
It's a lot more complicated than that. You contact the firm and say, I want to sign up. And they say, okay. And they send you a bunch of paperwork and a bunch of instructions. And then you have to pay them some money. And then you do all of this paperwork. And it involves finding a local funeral director, because they can run into problems handling your body after you die, and that helps avoid that. You need to find some kind of lawyer who can help you sign papers that say, I want to donate my body to science after I die, because that's effectively what you're doing. So you're donating your remains to this company. I think they need to know who your GP is, and I think a local coroner, because someone needs to declare you legally dead, and that can help expedite the process. And so you have to get all these papers in order. And then you have to sign a bunch of papers with the company itself that say, here's what I wish to happen with my remains, and I agree to do this, and here's my way of funding it. That's really important because they won't do it if you don't pay them. And you have to do all of this stuff in order to have signed up for it. So it's a whole bunch of work. And then after that, you need to wear some kind of medical alert thing that says, if dead, cool head with ice or something like that, because you're trying to prevent that information theoretic death. And so ideally you should wear this thing whenever you're out for the rest of your life. So it's pretty complicated to sign up for. You don't just call them up and they're like, okay, you're in.
Okay. So then the idea is you're walking along someday and you die.
Mm-hmm.
And all these plans swing into action, and hopefully everything works out well enough to preserve your brain. And then they get a hold of your body. What do they do next? Once you get past a doctor who declares you dead and people from the company get a hold of your body.
So in that scenario where you just suddenly drop dead, you probably end up at the hospital. A coroner or somebody pronounces you dead. Hopefully they follow the instructions that are written on you somewhere, like on a bracelet or a necklace or something like that. They call the cryonics firm and they'll fly a team out. And then hopefully the people at the hospital start cooling your head down, because that's the part that you really care about. And then the cryonics team shows up and they do a whole bunch of preparation work to your body to bring you down to just above freezing and ship you back to the cryonics facility for being lowered all the way to liquid nitrogen temperatures. So you can expect that your body would be put in like an ice bath, and they will circulate the blood through your heart, lungs, brain to try and keep it oxygenated, and ship you via air, usually, back to wherever. So then once you get to the cryonics facility, they'll do a whole bunch of stuff to prepare your body for being lowered below freezing temperatures. So they rinse all of the blood out of your body and replace it with a cryoprotectant solution. And the goal there is to prevent ice crystals from forming, because probably a lot of people have heard, oh, if you freeze biological things, ice crystals form and they puncture all the cell membranes and stuff like that. And it's true. The water in your body all wants to aggregate to itself, and it pushes tissues and other things out of the way. So you end up with big ice crystals and then little compressed areas of other chemicals. So they'll put this cryoprotectant in you and then start lowering your body down to an even lower temperature. And then once they've flushed all the blood out, they'll put it in a chamber that has liquid nitrogen pumped into it periodically, and it slowly lowers your body's temperature until you're at, I think it's like minus 190 C, something like that. And so then you're at liquid nitrogen temperatures, and you get transferred into a thing that's essentially a giant thermos, and you get stored head down vertically and just sit there waiting for hopefully someone to come by and resurrect you at a later date.
Okay, so it's just a giant liquid nitrogen dewar, and it has a little open valve for the gaseous nitrogen to escape from, and it's well insulated. And then from time to time, they just come by and top it off with new liquid nitrogen.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you pay the company all this money, you're paying for that service, all of this preservation, moving your body, and then the storage and topping off with liquid nitrogen for an unknown amount of time.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the analogy is when you pay for a funeral, or I guess an analogy is when you buy a cemetery plot, the money you spend on that is used for an annuity that pays for the upkeep of that plot forever. And so it's used to pay the taxes on the land. It's paid for the landscaping and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so similarly, part of this money that you pay for to this company is used for the ongoing expenses to keep up this building where the storage is done, and to keep the liquid nitrogen going, and to keep you frozen. And then hopefully in the future to thaw you out.
Yeah.
Okay. So are there financial projections attached to these companies for things like this? Like, do they make any attempt to say, like, I don't know, 500 years in the future, well, we think our financial position will look like this, and we can fund this many doctors to start thawing people out, and we think the material cost will be this much. How do they handle that when they're trying to sell you this service?
Well, I think most people buying this service don't really care that much. They probably already believe in the idea enough that they're like, whatever, you'll handle the details. Because if you're deciding whether or not to buy it, them explaining why they think they'll be financially solvent in 500 years doesn't really do much to affect your decision. Like, they could be like, oh, we'll probably run out of money in 498 years. And it'd be like, well, okay, I don't care. Like, that's probably long enough. It doesn't really matter. But what they effectively do is they take a huge amount of the money that you give them, like most of it, and just put it into a trust. And the trust pays out gradually. And I think most of the companies are really only concerned with keeping you frozen. In theory, they're responsible for reviving you also. But I think as that started to appear on the horizon, like it became scientifically possible to revive people, they would probably start charging new members more money and then spend that money to revive people. But I think more practically, they're only concerned with indefinite storage.
Okay, so that should be much cheaper then. So
yeah. All they're doing is pouring liquid nitrogen into a tank once a week. And I guess paying for facilities and land and stuff like that.
So what if you want to sign up for this and then you go through all the paperwork and you get signed up, and then let's say you get some kind of really bad disease that wastes you over a period of time? What can you do? How can you leverage this service in your favor then?
Well, if you really strongly believe that it has a decent chance of working, then you could move to an assisted suicide state or assisted death. I don't know what the term is, but sure, assisted suicide. And then
the happier term.
Euthanasia. And you can kill yourself in a hospital with the Cryonics team on standby and a doctor there waiting to declare you legally dead, and then immediately make the transition to start being frozen. And so if you believe that your quality of life has dropped enough that you'd want to be euthanized, then you can make sure that as little information from your brain is lost as possible. And then you get frozen and shipped off to a cryonics facility.
Okay, so do you know if any of these companies have agreements with each other to take over each other's responsibilities if one goes bankrupt?
As far as I know, they don't have any agreement like that. It really seems like it would be a good idea for them to.
Do you know if any kind of like professional society that these companies have formed to be like, let's share the latest technology and let's have like a professional journal for this? And
I don't think so. As far as I can tell, it's still like very amateur early days for these companies. There's not that much money coming in. There's not that much interest in this. So it's all still just a bunch of people like doing the best that they can, making it up as they go along. I predict that in maybe another 50 years, it'll probably be really professional and there'll be a much bigger industry. But right now, like the Cryonics Institute has these different designs for the doers that they put people in, and they're just coming up with them and then ordering them to be custom built. And if they're like, yeah, this seems to be economically viable, then they order more of them to be built, but they're just making it up because not that many people are doing this. There's not a lot of R&D effort going into it. And similarly, there's not a lot of R&D effort going into how do we create these indefinite trusts, and how do we create like steering committees that won't mess things up, and how do we steer the political environment so that it doesn't get declared illegal and all of our patients are thawed. And it just seems like they're not in a position yet where they have the resources to be thinking too far ahead. They're just trying to think, how do we keep everyone frozen for the next couple of years? And then, like, what do we do next?
Okay. So I guess we're at the point where you would assume you signed up for the service, you've died one way or another, you've been frozen, and then we're hoping that the technology comes along in the future to revive you. So we have this whole host of problems to worry about then. So we have issues of how do you repair your brain? How do you repair the damage that was done while you were trying to be frozen? So what are some of the possibilities for repairing the damage done while you're being frozen?
Okay, so pretty much all of this is like far future tech, because nobody has anything that's remotely close to this. Like, no mammal has ever been frozen to cryogenic temperatures and then been revived. They've frozen, I think, like a mouse liver or something like that, but that's a very simple organ compared to a lot of other organs. So it's just going to be wild speculation on my part. But if you're going to take a frozen person and just revive them all the way, I think you'd end up having to build sophisticated nanomachines or a sophisticated sort of chemical process. Really, I guess at a small enough scale, a nanomachine is like a chemical process. And it would have to just understand a lot about what human tissues look like and go through and repair them all at a molecular scale. It would also have to simultaneously do that while the person is thawing, because it's probably hard to do the appropriate operations while they're frozen. So they would need to be like thawed and repaired at the same time. I feel like the scenario where someone is actually thawed all the way up to room temperature and repaired on the way seems really unlikely to me. The thing that I expect to be most likely is someone figures out how to scan brains and then run them as emulations in a computer. I think that technology will probably come along first because the brain is like sitting there cryogenically frozen. So it's in this very stable configuration. And all you would need to do, which it's still very complicated, is scan the brain at a molecular scale and then simulate it on a computer. And so as far as that person is concerned, they would then be alive. They would be running in a computer. It could simulate input and output for them. And then it would be as if they were alive. They just wouldn't be in the real physical world.
What if they then run that person on 100 different computers?
Then there's 100 originals of that person running.
Are they still the same person?
Yes.
Are they the original person?
Yes, they're all the original.
Are they the guy who was frozen? My argument is if you scan a brain, let's say you scan all the information of the brain, you have the perfect state of the brain, then located in a brain emulator in a computer.
Mm-hmm.
And then you run that brain emulator simulation in a computer. What you have is a copy of the personality and the experiences and the knowledge and the memories of that person from their brain running in the computer.
Mm-hmm.
You can then make a copy of that emulation and run a second copy and a third and a fourth and an nth copy. And they can't all be the original person. And in fact, none of them are the original person. And so the original person who signed up and got frozen, he's still frozen in liquid nitrogen. Copies of him are running in the computer. And that's great for those copies. I mean, we could have philosophical arguments on whether those are conscious or alive or, you know, what the definition of those words are. But my argument is those are not the person who is frozen in the liquid nitrogen still.
Okay.
Are we talking past each other here?
No, I get it. So, in case it's not apparent yet, I am signed up for Cryonics. And that was actually my original objection to it that made me not want to sign up for it. I thought, well, if I'm frozen and like I really doubt they can thaw out all the tissues in my body correctly and restore me to like walking around. And also if they do that, I'll probably be an old guy at that point. So like what do they also invent, like the fountain of youth, you know, and restore me back to being a young guy with no problems? Like that seems kind of difficult no matter how far science advances. But running my brain in an emulation, that actually seems pretty reasonable. In fact, I could sort of see a scenario where if you want to scan people's brains to run them in an emulation, you'd want to freeze them first in order to scan them. So like that seems pretty reasonable. But then I thought, well, the emulated version will be like this Blake running on a computer, but it won't be the original Blake, right? They'll have all my memories, but they won't be me exactly. And the thing that actually got me past that objection was not solving the problem of how is that still me, but actually just thinking, I like me. I wouldn't mind having another me running at some point in the future after I've died and then been frozen. I would really be being a dick to that guy by not signing up for Cryonics and spending money that I'm not going to need after I'm dead in order to make sure that he's alive later. And so that was enough to get me to sign up, because I was like, well, future Blake Prime, who's maybe not exactly my consciousness, like I still like that guy and I would like him to exist. And this seems worthwhile. And a few people I've presented that argument to are like, you're right. Yeah. I would pay some money to cause this person to exist I'm very strongly aligned with them because they're an exact copy of me. It's like an argument for having kids. Like one of the reasons to have kids is because you can transfer your values to them. And like in some ways they'll be a copy of some of the parts of you. And that's one of the things that people value about having kids. So if you can have this kid as an exact clone of things that you believe, like, wouldn't you want to do that? So that got me over that argument. However, I later read other things and it really convinced me that what I was implicitly doing was like intellectually, I don't believe that souls exist. I don't think that people have some kind of magical part of them that's neither made of matter nor energy, but somehow directs their consciousness. But I realized what I was doing in thinking that copy of me is a copy and not the original is I was implicitly transferring over the concept of a soul to this copy. And so I was like, there's this original and they're made of matter in a certain configuration and energy passing through in a certain configuration. And that represents their memories and their ability to process experiences and store new memories. And then if you copy that into a computer, something isn't copied. And that thing that's not copied is a soul by another name. It doesn't really matter what term you use, but if you believe that the copy isn't the original, you're sort of implicitly transferring the way that people reason about souls, that there's like this magic spark that isn't part of physics that's not getting copied. And so consciousness has this magical bit, this magic spark, and you create another, in my opinion, original and run it, but you're like, that's not me, that's a different one. It doesn't have the same experience as me. It's not me. But really, there's a lot of places where you lose this continuity of consciousness and nobody minds. Like, you've probably heard the argument of, what if every time you go to sleep and wake up, you're a new person? And what if you are? You wouldn't notice and everyone's just fine with this. So maybe you die every night, but everyone's completely fine with it because that's just the way that we live. But none of us believe that to be true. You're not the same person that you were when you were a child. That person is long gone. You don't process experiences that way. You don't have that limited subset of memories. You're just not that person anymore. But we still call you the same person. You still think of yourself as the same person. But you're a completely different person from then. So at what point in this like ship of Theseus problem did enough parts of your brain get replaced that it's not you anymore? But you're like, oh, well, this transition happened very smoothly. Bits changed one at a time, but it was still me the whole time.
I think there's a fundamental difference here, though. In the examples you give, you have a one-to-one transition. Mm-hmm. But in the case of cryonics, you're suggesting that when you scan a brain and you have a perfect snapshot of all the data of the brain, and then you run an emulation, you can then just run as many emulations as you want. And I think that's where people have a philosophical problem. They say, now you just run as many as you like. And there's no one-to-one transition. It's a one to any number.
Yeah.
And that's a different problem.
But they're all originals. There's just now more of me.
So if they're all running, and let's say there are several emulations running, and then they also thaw out your original body, and they repair you, and then you and your original body is walking around.
Mm-hmm.
Then which one is you?
They're all me.
I feel like you're going to have trouble convincing people of this. I feel unconvinced, and I feel like most of the time you do a very good job convincing me of things.
Well, this one's particularly difficult because you have to understand exactly what someone's understanding of consciousness is, and then try to, in my opinion, pick apart the wrong beliefs that they have about why a copy is an original. And there's a lot of different reasons that people have for believing this. And it's often a lot more complex than it seems when you start digging into it. And the only way that you can really figure this out is like doing a series of thought experiments. Like, what if you're in a teleporter and it teleports you from point A to point B, but it actually creates a copy of you at B and then destroys the original? Like, is that still you, or did you die? And if you present this problem to a whole group of intelligent people, they'll all say, "Oh, it's obvious." And then you're like, "Which it's obvious which way?" And about half of them will say, "You die every time." And the other half will say, "It's just still you. It'd be fine." And then if you ask, "Would you take the teleporter?" A few of the people who say you die every time are like, "Yeah, I'd still take it." I've encountered this at work. And so it's really difficult to figure out why each person has their unique reason for believing that a copy is not an original. And the thing I found that seems to be in common is the thing I talked about with the implicit belief in a soul or like a magic spark. That seems to be the most common thing, but it's definitely not the majority of people. It's just the plurality. People have all these different reasons for believing what it is that they believe. People have a different idea of what consciousness means to them. Like, everyone thinks that they share an idea of what consciousness means, but then when you actually get down to it, they're hazy on their own belief, and they definitely don't understand what other people's are.
Yeah.
So the argument I would make is the thing that makes you like conscious and alive and yourself is that you have the memories that you do. And when new information comes in from the outside world, you process it in the way that you do. You could call that your personality. And it encodes memories in the way that you do, which is more of an aspect of how your brain is organized. And then you do this in a loop. So you keep taking in input from the outside environment and you keep storing memories. And you also produce output, like you affect the world around you. And so you produce output in a way that's uniquely you, and you probably encode memories in a way that's uniquely you. You probably don't encode them quite the same way as other people, because different things will have importance to you and other things will be unimportant. And so you might ignore something another person wouldn't, or whatever. So your set of memories, it's you. And then the way you process it, I would say, is roughly your consciousness. Like, if someone has all their memories erased, we don't say that that person died. We just say they lost all their memory, but they're still them because they still have the same personality. And so it's that ability to take in input and then produce these memories and produce this output in the way that's uniquely you, that's what makes you conscious, in my opinion. And so if you create a copy of that, that copy is an original because it'll have the same copy of memories and it processes inputs in the same way and it'll produce the same outputs. And so it's just also you. It's just another you. And the subjective experience of that you would be the same. You'd be like, in my case, I'm conscious Blake in a computer doing Blake things. And I'm not the Blake that was frozen. I'm just also the Blake that was frozen. And yes, I know we don't share memories. Like, I'm not remembering things and encoding them on the frozen brain, but I'm just the same me that was before, in the same way that I'm the same me when I wake up from sleeping. And people have this different view of how much discontinuity it takes to make it not the original anymore. But my argument is that no amount of discontinuity makes it not the original anymore. Like, if I wake up in a computer emulation after being frozen, I'm just also me. There wasn't some discontinuity that prevents it from being me. It's still me. And nothing would be lost. I'm just still me. And I think there's something, I don't know what it is, but at least in our culture, there's something that teaches people that that's not the case. I don't really know what that is. Maybe religion is a common one, but there is a very pervasive belief that it's not the same you. There's enough of a discontinuity there that it's now a copy and not an original.
Okay, so let's say that you get thawed out and you're not in a computer. They can perfectly fix your tissue.
I'm walking around.
You're walking around, and let's say they just have some other better methods. So let's say they transfer your brain to a newer Blake clone body.
Awesome.
Then you're not old again.
Sure.
So now you're in the future.
Mhm.
Great. Why did anybody want to thaw you out?
Well, in theory, the organization that you sign up for is responsible for thawing you out. Of course, they don't really have a lot of plans drafted up for this because it's not technologically possible right now. But I feel like their implicit goal is as soon as it becomes possible to thaw people out with an over 99% success rate, they'll just go ahead and do it to all their patients. Also, from their perspective, it'll reduce their indefinite costs down to zero because every time they thaw a patient out, they don't have to keep topping off their liquid nitrogen anymore. So, to some extent, it's a good financial investment for them as long as it doesn't cost infinity billion dollars to thaw people out. In practice, what I expect is that resurrecting people, or reviving is the term they use, reviving people who are frozen, will get so cheap that it'll just be like, why not? The barrier to doing it'll be so low that somebody who is interested and has authority over all of the patients will say, okay, now's the time. Just revive them all. And I think that the technology to do it will just keep getting cheaper. We've seen that for virtually any kind of technology that there is. It almost always gets cheaper to do it. And eventually, at some point, it's not possible. Then only governments can do it. Then only large corporations. And then eventually hobbyists are doing it. And they're like, check out my little hobbyist project. I sent a rocket into space or whatever. And so I think at some point, reviving people who are frozen will trickle down to the hobbyist level. And like, I would resurrect people who were frozen in the year 1000 if it cost me $5 to resurrect them. That seems like it would be very interesting, and I'm sure those people would rather be alive. And I think that the world would enjoy having those people in it. And especially in a hypothetical future world where they've cured all the diseases that all of these frozen patients have. Like that future world has a very high level of technology implicitly. Like all these patients are frozen because they had some kind of fatal problem occur. Like they died of cancer, they died of a stroke or something like that. And at the time they're being revived, you're like, yeah, I can also cure their cancer. And so that seems like a world that you'd want to be revived into and you'd want to live in. And it would be a world where it's very cheap for the people in it to revive you.
Okay, so you don't expect that there would be any issue where someone in the future would sit there and he would look out over this sea of liquid nitrogen doers and he would just be like, damn, this is a lot of mouths to feed if I start thawing these people out. Plus, they're all going to smell bad. They're all going to talk funny.
Why are they going to smell bad?
Well, because they come from olden times. I'm sure the standards for smelling good will be much higher in the future. Standards for smelling good only go up over time.
Couldn't they just wear futuristic hyper deodorant from space?
You can try, but then it'll be an issue of, you thaw them out, and then what are they going to do? Like, all of their knowledge is 1,000 years old. All of their skills are 1,000 years old. Do we just put them in a zoo and gawk at them? Do we just... I mean, is there this dream that it's going to be like the last scene of Interstellar where Matthew McConaughey just like walks out to the hangar and like he just steals a spaceship and he's like, hot damn, I just went 80 years in the future and I have a futuristic spaceship now. And he puts his robot in it and he just like goes out looking for the girl. And he's like, it's the future. I can just steal an advanced spaceship and go cruise the galaxy now.
I mean, clearly that was a very exacting prediction of exactly what's going to happen. So, yeah, I think we're just going to do exactly what happened in Interstellar. Well, so our world hasn't like cured cancer or all the other things that kill you. So it's not necessarily the best example to work from. But if you imagine reviving some royalty who lived in the year 1017, 1,000 years ago, I think that there's a fair number of people who would be interested in reviving that person. And they could learn English and, I don't know, make the talk show circuit. And I think that person would rather be alive. And hypothetically, if we've cured all diseases, that would definitely be a nice world to live in.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
That person would rather be alive. I mean, there's no disputing that, but but would somebody today want to revive them? And more importantly, would somebody today want to revive tens or hundreds of thousands of just regular people? Like, yeah, it would be really cool to bring back like some particularly historically important person from 1,000 years ago. That would be really awesome because they could fill in a lot of interesting historical details, and you could learn a lot about maybe a dead language or something, or I don't know. And there'd be a lot to learn. But, hundreds of thousands of people or something. I'm having trouble being convinced that when you get to the future, there will be this great desire to be like, let's thaw all these people out, and then now what? Unless we're in this kind of Star Trek future where I forget the exact term they use for it. It's like, is it a post-need society or something like that, where basically there's just so much stuff and so much ability to just create anything you would ever need so easily that nobody wants for anything.
I think the term you're looking for is post-scarcity.
There we go. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I think you would have to be living in a post-scarcity society, basically. It's kind of an oxymoron because you're never going to get around scarcity. There's always going to be some amount of it. But it would be a society where like food and healthcare and living space are not at all scarce. And so the marginal cost to resurrect someone is like less than 1 cent. And the marginal cost to sustain them too, like for a year, it's less than 1 cent. Like it would cost next to nothing. And to some extent, you have to be an optimistic person who believes that society will reach that point. If they never do, maybe you never get thawed.
Before strong AI catches up and destroys everything.
Yeah. So as we talked about in an earlier podcast, I believe that strong AI will eventually come to exist. And I think a strong AI would maximize human utility by resurrecting humans that had once been alive. So that all seems like it seems to follow to me, but I know it sounds far-fetched and fanciful to a lot of people.
Would a strong AI also seek to maximize human utility by just implementing some kind of really, really efficient cloning program to create lots of more humans?
Hopefully it has a better utility function than that.
Okay.
I mean, because it's true, one of the ways you could make AI go wrong is it finds the happiest person and then just clones them and kills everyone else off. Mission accomplished, right? So that sure sounds suboptimal and like it's not correctly implementing all of human values, but it is one of the ways that you could get it wrong.
I guess what I did was inadvertently showed how to misinterpret a utility function, because I took from your statement to mean that just having more humans meant that things were better. And I guess what you meant was we need to make things better for the existing humans.
Yeah. I think what people generally seem to value is having more different and happier people. Like most people don't advocate for a world that only has 1 million really happy people in it and eradicating all the rest. Most people don't advocate for cloning the happiest seeming people and only having a world populated with them. And most people don't advocate for a world with the maximal number of people who are all kind of unhappy.
Okay. So what if I'm concerned about this issue of, whether or not someone wants to revive me in the future? And so I say, well, I'm just going to make sure that I'm taken care of in the future. I'm going to save money today, and I'm going to get my wealth into the future. I'm going to invest in a bunch of stocks, and then I'm going to leave that money, and it's just going to roll over for 1,000 years, and it's going to be worth so much that someone is going to want to revive me, because then they'll be my buddy, and they'll hope that I'll give them a little bit of my wealth. What about that?
Okay, so you can do that. I did a bunch of research about it. The financial instrument you're looking for is a perpetuity. And in common law, there is this rule against perpetuities, which generally restricts them to, this is a little complicated, but 21 years after the death of the last beneficiary who was alive and known to the person creating the trust at the time the trust was created. So you can't refer to people who aren't alive yet at the time you're creating the trust. And so it's 21 years after the last person dies. However, at least in the US, there are some states that explicitly have a rule against the rule against perpetuities. And they're like, sure, go hog wild, make your 1,000-year perpetuity or indefinite or whatever. Oddly, Florida has a restriction on perpetuities, but it's 360 years. I don't know how you determine that's the right stopping point. You can just imagine some guy advocating for 350 years, and they're like, no, that's too short. so 360 it is. But some countries, Bahamas, for example, allows indefinite perpetuities. Another way that people kind of get around it to make a really long perpetuity is you say, when the last living descendant of Queen Victoria dies, who is alive at the time I was drafting this perpetuity, that's when it terminates. And the descendants of Queen Victoria are fairly well known and documented, and they're very, very numerous. And so your odds that someone's going to live to like 110 before they die it's pretty good. So you're going to be able to draft up a perpetuity that's going to last like at least 120 years or so. And that's at the time you're doing it. So presumably you're not 0 years old. So it's going to happen a very long time after you draft it up, and still a long time after you die.
Okay, so is a perpetuity just like a trust? It's an entity that holds assets.
Yeah. But then you have this additional challenge. When you are cryogenically frozen, or cryonically frozen, I don't know the term for it. When you're frozen, you have to be legally declared dead. And there is no provision right now for being legally declared revived. I don't know what it would be.
Undead.
Legally undead. That would be really funny. So there's not really a provision for you to take possession of your property afterwards. And the law just doesn't exist. So you're going to be throwing your wealth into the future, but you're going to have a hard time catching it. I'm not sure how you would do that exactly. Maybe you come up with something where the trust agrees to give it to a person who meets X, Y, and Z condition, and then you try to be really specific about it. You could try and come up with bearer wealth, and then you're the only one who has access to it. Like burying gold bars in a mountain somewhere. That would probably work. Also, you have to guess that gold bars are going to be of value in this future time where you're resurrected.
And that the mountain is still accessible. There's not a parking lot and a shopping center built over it.
Probably a Starbucks right on the tippy top of Mount Everest. But if you're believing this like I am and thinking you'll be revived into a post-scarcity society, one of the implications of that is they don't give a crap about gold bars anymore. They have all the gold bars they'll ever need. So it'd be much harder to project wealth into the future in this society where resurrecting someone, which is impossible now, is cheap. Like, what will the society value that you have right now? One of the things that you can do is you can memorize the keys to cryptocurrencies, and then you'll still have access to that in the future. But is a cryptocurrency going to be valuable? However, this is one of the few instruments that's like a bearer instrument solely from your memory, where if you just remember it, then you own it and no one else can own it. But also, if we're imagining that people's brains are getting scanned while they're frozen, all someone has to be able to do is read the memory out of your brain in order to get it. So you can imagine some kind of scammer who goes around and scans everyone's brains who's in cryonic suspension, and then they just read all the private keys to Bitcoin wallets out of their brains and then never resurrect them. They just steal all their money. But as far as I know, those are really the only feasible things you could do. I suppose if you created a perpetuity and it had a bunch of wealth and it was payable to you, even in a post-scarcity society, if it kept gathering interest and it had a provision to keep gathering assets, it could probably gather assets that are worth something. I don't know. Maybe they buy short domain names. Eventually we'll run out of those, right? So, I don't know. Those will always be scarce. There's no way around that one. You can't just come up with infinity names and have everybody own them equally somehow. But I think you're betting on a charitable society that wants to revive you and is willing to take care of you.
Okay. So you said that all of this was pretty small so far.
Hmm.
Has it pretty well escaped government scrutiny?
Yeah, basically.
So there are just these couple of nonprofit companies collecting corpses, and the government is not stepping in to help.
Well, they call them patients,
Okay.
but yes, the government doesn't care.
The company calls them that.
From the perspective of the government, this is a very fancy and silly type of burial that you can elect to have after you're dead.
Oh, okay. I guess similar to having a couple of grams of your ashes blasted into space.
Yeah.
I think we've pretty much navigated through all the questions I had emailed you.
So there's one question that everyone asks that you actually haven't.
How much does it cost?
Yes.
And how do I fund it?
Yeah. So if you sign up for Alcor, which is the facility in Phoenix, it costs $80,000 to have your head preserved, which they call a neuro patient, I think, or $200,000 for your body to be frozen. And if you sign up for Cryonics Institute, it costs $1,250 to sign up with them, and then $28,000 at the time of death to freeze your body. And the sign up fee with Cryonics Institute you have to pay when you sign up, but the $28,000 you can pay with anything. And the way they recommend funding that is with life insurance. So your life insurance will pay out when you die to Cryonics Institute. And then they'll turn around and spend that money on keeping you frozen. Well, getting you frozen and then funding the trust to keep you frozen. So a lot of people, I think it costs like $100,000 at the time you sign up. But really, it costs a lot less. It's like $1,000 when you sign up, and then you set up life insurance. But if you're young, like I am, then it's not going to have to be paid out for a really long time. So it actually doesn't cost that much. And I know you didn't want to talk about it too much, but you can sort of make this Pascal's wager thing with it, where it's like, well, I'm weighing whether to freeze myself against the alternative, which is dying for sure and never having a chance of being revived. And so, at least in my opinion, it seems like freezing yourself has slightly better odds of continuing to keep you alive into the future. And it costs money that you aren't going to be able to use because you're dead. I suppose it costs life insurance premium while you're alive. So maybe you decide whether that's worth it or not to you.
Right, but $28,000 of life insurance, the premium on that while you're young is very small.
Yes, it's very, very small. And another term I've heard for this is it's an ambulance ride to the future. And so if you just view it as a healthcare expenditure, where you're like, in case I die, and in case cryonics works, I'm going to go ahead and buy a policy, and then maybe I get revived in the future. It seems worthwhile to me. It seems like a good gamble to take. I think the odds of it working are pretty low. There's a lot of different barriers. You could die in a way where freezing you doesn't do anything. You could be frozen and then something happens to the company or you in particular. Maybe just no one wants to revive you. And all these things could happen and they all add up to really low odds of success. But I probably wasn't going to do anything with that couple of $1,000s anyway. And so it seems like just a good bet to take.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot cheaper than I was expecting it would be. I was thinking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, I think it's seen as a fanciful thing for the rich. But really it's a practical thing that anyone with like a job in the tech industry can easily afford. Like at the place I work, we all get a life insurance policy just by default as one of our benefits. And so I just elected to have some of it pay out to Cryonics Institute in case I die. And like that was about it. And then I had to do a bunch of paperwork, but it's not really that much effort. And then for my wife, we purchased a term life insurance policy for 10 years. And then at the end of 10 years, we're probably just going to set up a trust that pays out when she dies and it'll fund it.
So you would just hand that trust $28,000 and then it would just hold that cash.
Yeah.
So were Walt Disney and Ted Williams frozen?
I actually went and checked that because I thought you might ask. Walt Disney was cremated. Sorry, Walt. He has been information theoretically destroyed. Ted Williams, the baseball player?
Yeah, I isn't there a rumor that he was frozen?
Yeah, I believe he was frozen at Cryonics Institute. And there are these horror stories from this one guy, like, they froze his body and then they used a hammer and chisel to cut his head off of his body. And it's sort of like, well, yeah, I mean, what's wrong with that? Like, if you're frozen solid, then why do you care what method is used to separate a head from your body? Also, that actually makes me think he's probably frozen at Alcor, not Cryonics Institute, because Cryonics Institute only freezes whole body patients because they want to avoid the stigma of what if they take their head off. Like, that bothers some people who are somehow not bothered by the whole rest of the process. But presumably his head is on ice somewhere and he could be potentially revived in the future.
Can I get my pets frozen?
Yes, you can.
Just cats and dogs, or can I get parakeets and hamsters and small things too?
I don't know if freezing a bird would work.
It must be from the mammal kingdom.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, it could be weird enough that they don't know how to do it right. They'll freeze mammals, though, and they just freeze them with the same process they use on humans. I really like my dog. I'm actually thinking about signing her up for cryonics. In a hypothetical world where I get revived, it would be great if my dog is also revived. I mean, that's something that happens to you. When you sign up for cryonics, you think it's like buying a lottery ticket. So it's like not that likely to work, right? But there's a chance that you hit the jackpot and you're like, hey, I'm back. And it makes you want to sign up other people that you know. Because in this hypothetical world where you're back, it would be too bad if everybody else didn't sign up for it and they died. And so you start thinking, it would be cool if we're all together in the future, and you'll want to sign up your family and your friends and your pets. Your pets don't care, but you can care on their behalf. But yeah.
Do they start treating you like you're trying to sell them Amway?
I suppose you could be really pushy with it. I'm just sort of like, have you considered this? It's an option. If you have the money, it's a worthwhile bet. I would advise all of our listeners to look at it and look at it with an open mind. And you can also just say, well, maybe I'll sign up later. And that's okay. Just try not to die before you sign up.
I try not to die every day.
Why don't you have a self-driving car then?
Probably not as soon as I can get one.
You can get one now. I heard you rented one. A level 2 autonomous car.
That's a level 2.
So now, having heard all this, are you going to sign up?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I didn't know it was that cheap.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap. Do you still feel like it would be you that's getting revived? Or are you still not sure on that one?
I'm still very skeptical, and I don't agree with your argument, but I think you gave me enough base that I can go off and think about it for a long time.
Okay.
I do understand your argument, and I think your method of arguing that is very effective, where you talk about a person is made up of matter and energy, and then some people additionally believe that a person is made up of a soul. And if you have a copy that is a perfect copy of the matter and energy, and yet you don't believe in a soul, then what is the difference?
Mm-hmm.
And somehow I have to try to reconcile that problem.
Yeah. I'll be interested to know your steps.
Yeah. So I think I fully understand the problem that I need to go contemplate.
Well, that would be cool. You'd be the first person I convinced, I think. Hopefully I convince a few of our listeners to look at it more closely. I suppose I also convinced my wife.
Wait, you're saying you've talked to a bunch of people about cryonics and you've not convinced anyone to sign up?
Right.
Wow, really?
Mm-hmm. I know one person who was already previously interested in it, and he asked me for more information, and I think that convinced him to continue, but I didn't change his mind there. I really think that the opinion of cryonics being weird and unlikely to succeed is so deeply embedded that people are really unable to approach it with an open mind. And I would say that was essentially what happened to me, too. I read about it a long time ago in something that said, was Walt Disney frozen? And it showed a picture of like a frozen body or something like that. And I was just like, that's dumb. That wouldn't be the same person when they're revived. And then I just never thought about it again. And then I encountered a website where everyone on it took it for granted that cryonics was a good idea and it was going to work. And I was like, what's wrong with all you crazy people? And then I read through this long sequence of arguments, mainly talking about identity and consciousness. And it convinced me of the viewpoint that I now have that I told you about. And that was really helped me realize that my reasoning had been flawed this whole time, and I just hadn't ever gone and reevaluated it. But it's hard to have just a lunchtime discussion with your coworkers and convince them of this, because it's this really deep philosophical argument. Who am I really? What would a copy be? Like, it's really hard, and it's hard to think about, and it's sort of a serious, not light argument to have. And so it's hard to convince people unless you have a bunch of sessions where you're like, let's really talk about what it is that you believe there. Like, you sure you don't believe in souls? Are you really sure? You know?
Or you have the Fungineering podcast.
Yes, where we convince you instantly in just an hour.
1 hour, 14 minutes, and 57 seconds.
Uh-huh. Boom, you are convinced.
Minus editing. So, do we want to set like a secret meetup? So people who listen to this podcast, when they're revived in the future, we can all meet up somewhere. We'll set it now. How do we do that?
We'll encode it in the blockchain. So do you have any other questions about cryonics?
I think we pretty well navigated through all of the questions I'd emailed you earlier in the week. And yay for us not catching each other flat-footed like before.
Do you prefer it this way?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I don't know either. Yeah.
I like the candid stupidity of one of us being like, I prepared for several hours for this podcast, and then the very first question just blows it all to hell.
Do helicopters fight each other?
I don't know. I kind of remember a couple cases where I read about it, and gee, I hope I can remember enough to sound halfway intelligent. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I guess if you like that podcast, let us know, and we'll keep emailing lists of questions to each other in preparation before it. And if you didn't like that podcast, I don't know. I'd really encourage you to just shut up and keep it to yourself. So I'm not sure how we're ever going to find this out. Go comment on one of our other podcasts and tell us how much you liked that one instead, and you liked its candid responses.
What I would say? What I would say is if you would like us to email back and forth with each other our questions early in the week so that we make sure we have answers for them, so that, it's more structured and we don't catch each other flat-footed. If you would like that arrangement, then go to our Patreon page and sign up for $2 a month. And if you don't like that setup, go to our Patreon page and sign up for $3 a month. And in that way, we'll know.
Yeah. You could send a signal through Patreon.
We will decode the signal.
Or you could just sign up for $100 a month, but add your suggestion, and we'll take you seriously.
For $1,000, we will fly to your house and record a podcast in your living room. Actually, it'll probably cost more than that, but you know what? The first one will only cost $1,000.
I think we could do $10K and you pay airfare and hotel. I'll take a day off work to come speak at a conference of one guy's house.
Can we do a clap track like a TED conference where we make ourselves feel like we're super important by doing like the fake clapping on the intro?
They finally got rid of that,
Oh, really?
Yeah. TED, ideas worth spreading. And it always starts with a round of applause. I'm so disappointed with TED Talks. The way I describe them to everyone is, it feels like you learned something. But later, when someone asks you what you learned, you can't tell them a damn thing.
I feel like the problem was just oversaturation. Like in the beginning, they didn't have events very often. And so the quality was really good. And then eventually they were like, let's have a TED session in 14 cities this weekend.
You might be confusing TED and TEDx.
Should I care?
One of them's like the name brand experience, and the other one doesn't have the same level of vetting. But what have you ever learned from a TED Talk that mattered? Like, you watched a TED Talk, you learned some piece of information, and then it affected a decision you made in your life. I bet you cannot think of a single thing because they just don't matter.
I remember some interesting and some funny talks and things like that, but no,
Yeah.
nothing like what you're talking about, where it's like, oh, that shaped my life.
Yeah.
Like, I can look at certain books that I've read and been like, oh man, that really changed the way I think about things. Like Guns, Germs, and Steel or Selfish Gene. Those are two very formative books.
Yeah. It doesn't have anything like that, but it has all the trappings. It sure feels like you're about to get a world shattering insight. You listen to that applause track, you see a whole bunch of photos come flying at you. Ideas worth spreading. Oh, yeah, spread them to me. And then at the end, all it did was waste your time.
All right. Why don't we exit with an applause track?
And on that positive note.